Good morning, everyone. Welcome to BL's Facebook Live. Yesterday we saw a landslide victory of Modi government. It's Modi 2.0, and we are here with three of our panelists who will talk about the impact of the second Modi government on the markets, on politics, as well as on the economy. So we have with us Rahul Arora. He's the CEO of Nirmal Bang. We have Irfan Engineer. He's the director at Center for Study of Society and Secularism, and we have Professor RamKumar from Tata Institute of Social Sciences. So, just to begin with, Rahul, how do you see the impact of another Modi government on the overall markets?
So, I think it's definitely good from a continuity standpoint. The one good thing that will probably emerge out of this election is that a lot of the disruptions that took place in the first phase of the last government will probably sort of land up seeing fruit in the second half, especially GST and this entire shift that we've been talking about from the unorganized sector to the organized, and the impact therein it will have on corporate earnings will lag. So I think it is possible that for the next 12 to 15 months the economy still tries to find its feet. Obviously there's a global overhang of what's happening with the US and China, so the Modi government will have to sort of find its feet through that in the initial phase. But I think the initial thrust is probably going to be very pro-consumer. I think even had the Congress come back to power in some way, even they had their own version of a populist measure in India. So I think given the global overhang and the exports and imports therefore not being in your control, the fiscal deficit already flirting with sort of not comfortable levels, and there is still not that much confidence in corporate India to come in and invest right away. So in a sort of nutshell, I think consumer-driven economy should be doing pretty well because of how the first budget will pan out. But I think the continuity factor is good, and I think the 3 exit years of this government, unless they do something really crazy, which I don't think they will, but I think the exit 3 years of the second term would be very strong, and I think the market will probably slowly start pricing that in, and you saw a little bit of it that's been taking place since the exit poll results came through.
So yesterday we saw a huge jump in the market initially, and then almost a 300-point slide on the Bombay Stock Exchange. How do you see that as a reaction from the market?
It wasn't surprising because I think there has been so much anticipation that has been built into this election outcome. The one thing that when we talk to investors is very clear. Sitting in Bombay and Delhi, we really have no idea what's happening in rural India. So I think all of us got the outcome wrong. I think there was a general consensus that this government would return. But I don't think anyone, even the most optimistic Modi supporter, probably thought that these would be the numbers with which they would return. But I think because of this huge run that we have seen, especially post the exit polls, the valuations have become very expensive. On our own, at our own broking firm, the estimates, I mean, the Indian market was already trading at 20 times FY20 earnings, which is probably the most expensive we've seen, even in Dr. Manmohan Singh's tenure or in NDA one. So it is bound to happen. Like I said, it is probably going to find its feet over the next 6-8 months. There's going to be nothing magical that he's going to do overnight, but I think there will be some systems and processes put into place. Eventually, I think I would not be surprised if over the 5-year period of this Modi term, the market probably compounds in aggregate. If you look back at the end of this 5-year period, it will probably compound about 15%. I wouldn't be too surprised with that.
On that note, Rahul talked about misreading the market, or misreading the political situation and the expectation of the landslide victory. Irfan, I would like to understand from you, did the opposition also completely misread the sentiments and highlight issues like Pulwama, Rafale, etc.?
Yes, I think not the opposition parties, but
and also the core issues of economy, unemployment completely got left out by the opposition. Do you think that played a role?
I think opposition parties misread the situation, but not only opposition parties. I think, as Rahul put it, that the most optimistic Modi supporter also did not expect this returns. I think the core issues of joblessness, agrarian distress was there and is there, and there's no hope that it will get resolved in any near future. But people just did not have any alternative narrative, an alternative plan to address that. I think the Congress manifesto was very good, but they just could not communicate it to the people. The opposition could not communicate their plan to the people. Nyay, according to me, is a good plan. It would have got votes, but the people who were to benefit from Nyay just didn't know and just don't know even today about what this Nyay is about. The Congress candidates who were contesting, they were not clear about how this will operate and how it will function and who will benefit and whether all in the family will benefit, or if supposing somebody is working but has less than 6,000 income, will it be a top up or will he get the entire? I think nobody knew exactly how this is going to work, and there was that communication failure by opposition. They did raise some of the issues of joblessness, about agrarian distress. They could not communicate well, and people did not see any alternative plan, a credible alternative plan, and there was no leader.
So with that, do you also think the dynasty politics is kind of over in the country? We've seen Rahul Gandhi losing, we've seen Scindia losing, and many such leaders actually not doing well in the elections. So,
dynasty is in BJP as well. Dynasty is in Shiv Sena as well. Dynasty is in many allies of BJP, and dynasty is there in Congress. I don't think we are done with dynasties. Dynasties will come up. Just a doctor's son wants to be a doctor. A businessman's son wants to be a businessman and inherits the business. Likewise, politicians' children want to inherit the family capital. I don't think that will end. But I think other people also should get chance. The regional leaders, or unless we go for merits and best politician and politicians who have the credibility, that will dynasty will always come up off and on, and merits will challenge dynasty, and at times dynasty will challenge merit.
But right now, who's challenging who?
Right now, of course, Modi succeeded in convincing the people that dynasty won't work. But should a meritorious politician come, and him having children, dynasty will come back.
So at least we can't expect that to happen immediately because we don't have.
Yes, immediately.
Right. So Ram, taking this forward, what do you think are the top 5 reforms that the government should work on priority right now?
Well, I think that major issues that the government should take up are the major issues that it thoroughly mismanaged in the last 5 years. Right? Now, before I come to that, allow me to just pass a comment on the earlier two distinguished speakers. I think there are 3 factors to be understood in this election. First, this is probably the first in many probably decades that you have a government, a political regime, where you have a toxic combination of Hindutva nationalism on the one hand and a free market ideology on the other hand. This is probably a carryover of Narendra Modi of Gujarat as Chief Minister into the Prime Minister of India. As a result, what Narendra Modi as a politician is able to tap is the sort of pent-up communal ideology that has been sort of not exactly hidden, but not expressible in some sense in large sections of time. And that has combined itself with the interests of big business, and that's why I call it toxic. This is a combination that hasn't been in state power for some time, and that's extremely worrisome. But it's extremely possible in the political arena. That's worrisome. Number 2 is the presence of big money in politics. The big business of the first toxic combination comes into play in the second factor, where I heard one commentator calling it BJP's ambush Right? The ambush is primarily because they had extraordinary money power. So that is something that through the electoral bonds you
But
saw.
so did Congress for a long time.
Well, electoral bond, yes, I'm not saying I'm not saying it's a matter of yesterday. I'm saying the problem of absence of electoral reforms in India, which sort of course dates back to many decades, but has come into real dominance in the last few years with the kind of money power that the BJP has been displaying. And that's primarily because of the presence of big business in its pocket. That's something that is secondly worrisome to me. The third, but when I say worrisome, it's for me, but obviously it has worked among the voters. The third issue is Pulwama. I think every economic failure of the government, it has been able to sort of push into the background with the pushing in front of the ultra-nationalist, militarist rhetoric of it. It's only yesterday or day before yesterday that you come to know that India killed its own soldiers more in terms of numbers than Pakistan killed Indian soldiers, but that never was told to Indian people before the elections. So this whole rhetoric of nationalism, this whole rhetoric of a military agenda was primarily done to hide the failures of this government in the economic sector. That thanks to demonetization, sort of manifesting itself in unemployment, manifesting in itself in poor growth rate, forcing the government to sort of change methodologies and play around with the truthfulness of the data and so on. So these, you can't sort of...
so a lot of the economic challenges definitely remain.
That is why I'm saying, I began by answering this question by saying that all the stupidities that this government did in the last 5 years need to be repaired now, right? Now, if the same people continue in state power, if the same advisors continue to advise the government, I see the same stupidities possibly being repeated in the next 5 years. What is happening in agriculture? You need extremely careful state intervention. Though some people call it reforms, I would call it extremely careful state intervention in terms of setting right the priorities in agriculture. How do you create jobs? Okay, and not through jargons like Skill India, Startup India, Stand Up India, Sit Down India, etc. We actually need public investment. We actually need sort of extremely large skill generation policies, the skill acquisition policies. You need investment in infrastructure. You need investment in job creating sectors, right? And these are possible only if there is a course correction in terms of the ideology of this government, right? The economic ideology that is followed by this government, that has been followed by this government, also why that's exactly why the UPA failed, right? And the NDA repeated the same failures, but was able to cover up with an ultra-nationalist agenda, right? So a lot of things have to be repaired: agriculture, employment, industry. Tell me one sector of the economy which has been a success under Modi government. I don't know.
Well, so when you talk about agrarian reforms and joblessness, which is there, where do you think the government failed and could have done better than
the classic example, the classic illustration of Modi government's failure in agriculture is its putting together a sort of completely ill thought out policy of giving a cash transfer to agriculture in the last 4 months before the elections, right? That was, for me, that is an admission of guilt of the BJP government, that it messed up in the agricultural sector. It couldn't do anything in the agricultural sector. Tell me one thing that it did in the agricultural sector, right, that benefited the farmers. It started off by saying that it will double the income of farmers by 2022. It probably ended up by halving the income of farmers by 2019, right? Now, what has it done? I don't see anything positive that this government has done in any economic sector. That's why every economic sector, you look at your investment rate falling, look at your savings rate falling, exports as a percent of your GDP falling, but your GDP rate 8%. How? Methodology has been changed. Well, you fooled people once. Can you fool people twice?
So on that note, you said that we need to probably have different people heading different departments from what we've seen in Modi 1.0.
Well, Modi, of course, doesn't have economists. It has chartered accountants to advise on economic issues.
So, on the finance minister, Rahul, would you like to take? Who do you expect to be the finance minister, and who do you want to be the next finance minister?
So I think that's probably an academic discussion at this point. We'll probably know in due course who it's likely to be. But I think the most important thing from a market standpoint is, so if you take the most important reform, so to speak, of the Modi government, it is, from a market standpoint, it was the implementation of the goods and services tax. It would have been done by some government. Had he not done it, Congress would have done it, maybe an alternative government. It had to be done. Globally, people have moved towards the goods and services tax. Interestingly, this is the first ever incumbent government in the history of implementation of GST anywhere on the planet that has implemented GST and come back to office. Prior to this, nowhere in the world has it happened. So in that sense, it was quite remarkable that he did it, because intuitively, when you implement GST, it's a bit inflationary. So I think one of the biggest achievements of the Modi government, and of course he got the benefit of it by doing sort of nothing, so to speak. But the crude, which was at about $150 when he was announced PM candidate in 2013 September, in around there, went all the way down to $20-25. But even though it's gone up, it's tripled from there. I think one of the things that I was actually surprised by was that the NDA government did not talk so much about its accomplishments on keeping inflation low. So if you look at Dr. Manmohan Singh's second tenure, you had inflation at 10-11%, which was wreaking havoc everywhere. And this time you may argue that there was a very big boon that was probably thrown into his lap. Incidentally, last night in the US markets, crude was down again. So I don't know if this is some sort of karma that comes back to revisit it. It's sometimes fortune favors the brave, but I think keeping inflation low is obviously going to have its impact on farmer incomes. There's no question about that. And I think what India needs to focus on, if you're talking about farmers, because it's such a big issue, is actually improving, which happens in your company, my company, is we want to improve productivity of employees. And I think somewhere, and because the Congress has ruled this country for so long, and Prime Minister Modi's one of his first speeches in Parliament last year was, the Narendra scheme is actually a reflection of the failures to improve productivity. I fault him for having continued with it. There is no question about that, because a lot would have been done. But it is not something new. I don't think the Congress itself for so many decades has actually encouraged unproductivity of employees. So it's not something that can change overnight. It's something very similar to a social security system or the stimulus package that the United States government gave post the Lehman crisis. So these are not things that can change overnight. But I think the fact that you're moving to a slightly more stable taxing regime, if you speak to most middle class or upper middle class people, they have no problems paying a little higher taxes if the overall aggregate lower middle class or the poor is actually moving up the consumption chain. So if you just look at the intuitive formula of GDP, which is C plus I plus G plus X minus M, that is consumption, investment, government spending, exports and imports, given what's happening globally, which is what I often point, the X and M is not in your control right now, because that is being dictated by the two biggest economies in the world, and India will probably have to wait its turn to get there. So you have consumption, investment and government spending. The government has done a lot of spending in infrastructure through road creation, ports, etc. Those data points are available. You can actually see those if you go on ground. My problem is that not enough was done, especially because there was anticipation under the Modi government to push up private expenditure. So I don't think that level of confidence is there, but I don't blame the Modi government entirely, because I think there was so much reckless lending that was done in the 10 years preceding. And now the banks having to clear up. I mean, I could reverse this question back to you. 5 years back under the UPA, could you have thought that the Axis Bank chairman would have changed, the ICICI Bank chairman would have changed, the Yes Bank chairman would have been ousted within 30 days? I mean, these are
reforms.
I think these are. I think they've. It's not just that. I think he's taken on his core constituency. He almost lost his home state of Gujarat. Who did demonetization hit the most? It hit the Gujaratis and the Marwadis basically. He's taken on his core constituency. He almost lost his home state election. He's taken on bank chairmen in this country. He's gone after what you would call the crony capitalists. I mean, see what's happening with the SRs and the, I can name them one after the other industry. They're being forced to liquidate assets. This was not thought of 5 years back. Right. The fact is, there are things on the ground that have changed, and he has successfully been able to convey that message. The other point that was made that, I started off by saying that I think people in urban India have not understood what's changing on the ground. And I think the impact that he has placed on digital, sitting in a plush office in South Bombay, you cannot get it. You need to go down there and see that there are actual benefits of some of these schemes that people will scoff at. And I was probably one of those. I didn't understand the impact of gas or toilets and things. There are people who benefited. Now you can argue whether those numbers could have been more. Fair enough, but there are people who benefited. And I don't think this election was won post Pulwama. I think this election was won long before, because I think neither did the opposition have a plan. The central force of this election was, are you pro Modi or anti Modi? And the reason Mamata Banerjee almost lost West Bengal is because she changed the narrative to upset what is the major constituency of India. You cannot win an election like that. So I think you may argue that Pulwama probably worked in his favor. Nobody's going to take that away, what would have happened. But I think this election was won long before Pulwama even happened, because there was genuine things that were moving on the ground, which sitting here we're not able to understand. And when you travel, and not that I have, but when you speak to people on the ground, drivers, this, that and the other, who have families, there are beneficiaries. So I think, taking on his core constituency, taking on corporates, taking on banks, and yet being able to swing this election the way he did, I think it's nothing short. We probably won't see another kind of election like this in my lifetime, but I think it's commendable with everything going against them. I mean, this was the easiest election for the Congress to win.
But right now we are also staring at a massive debt in the financial market. Do you think it's an emergency for the government to actually deal with that?
I think that's why you had the IBC that came in. I mean, was bankruptcy even an option? As we speak right now, the SL group is liquidating assets. Yesterday, Reliance Mutual Fund sold a stake to Nippon. You had Diwan Housing that is, sort of liquidating its assets. These are things happening as we're speaking. And bankers are getting, albeit with a 20-30% haircut, but they're getting that money back. The reason credit growth in the economy is so slow is because, and I was with a top 3 private sector bank chairman yesterday. He's like, corporates are so scared of corruption now. That is why they are not coming. Utilization levels are low. People are not doing capex because earlier it was a free-for-all system.
So Ram, what is your view on this?
I just mentioned a while back, this election cannot be read only on the economic front. That's exactly what I said. That all the economic issues or the problems that the country faces at this point of time were sought to be.
Would you agree that Modi actually brought in a lot of tough reforms that could have actually?
I don't think so. It was Narendra Modi who blocked GST for the longest period of time. As he came to power, he became the biggest admirer of GST. So there's a political game being played out there, and I'm not ready to absolve Modi of any sort of blame there. But the point is that you had issues in the economy, and there's an additional factor that I would like to state. That's why I insist that this election cannot be read on the economic front alone. There is a great spread of a particular kind of thinking on communal lines in India, and that's where Pulwama comes in. What Pulwama did was to sort of bring back that sort of, I said this government is a combination of Hindutva nationalism on the one hand and particular kind of ideology, market ideology on the other. The first sort of came back very strongly, and the mass organizations of the BJP, organizations connected to the Sangh Parivar, had for a long period of time entrenched this idea in the minds of people, including in the rural areas, that sort of this divisive kind of form of thinking, this divisive form of ideology has spread without our knowledge in the urban areas. So you cannot read this election primarily on the economy. Every failure on the economic front was covered up by another kind of argument in another front. So
just if I may, so in September of 2013, when Prime Minister Modi was announced as the Prime Ministerial candidate, he had not become Prime Minister, the Nifty was at 5,100 and the rupee was at 70. We're sitting 5 years hence and the Nifty is at 12,000. The rupee, albeit appreciated all the way to 62 because of global factors, we sort of pulled back a little bit but I think with the kind of foreign flows that are coming in, it'll probably appreciate a little bit more. So I think if you're talking about wealth generation that has happened, you know, to one aspect of it, I do understand that stock market is not reflective of the entire economy and that point is taken. But to say that this term of Modi was an economic failure just by pure statistics in totality, I find it a little hard to digest. Also, I would love to know, although I have no numbers to back it up, and I would really appreciate if somebody did, as to how many people actually voted because of Pulwama. You won 39 out of 40 seats in Bihar. You almost won the entire seats that you had in Uttar Pradesh. You lost about 10 or give or change. You know, I just got a WhatsApp this morning saying if you take a train right from here at Churchgate all the way up to Punjab, that's where you will find the first Congress MP. So I want to know how much of this actually changed in the last 3 or 4 months, or how many people actually even knew that Pulwama's attack even happened. I mean, someone came and told me to vote because of Pulwama attack, and I had to pay twice the price for milk, tomatoes, onions. No, I'm saying I don't know how many people voted on that. I'm saying I would appreciate some data on that. Let me put it this way, if you were paying twice the price of milk, tomatoes, onions, your wife or your mother was paying that, and you had Pulwama on the other day, you're going to vote on real issues. I don't think you swing on one attack. If that was the case, I don't think Donald Trump is ever going to lose another election in the United States of America.
That's precisely my point.
So I don't think that was the case. I could be wrong. I mean, each person has their own views. But
so
you know,
let's assume that it was won on Pulwama. But then if you're talking about Modi 2.0, it can't be again one on just sentiments, right? You have to have core issues resolved. What do you think the government really needs to do to really make a difference?
Actually, the government won't resolve core issues at all. It's not even promising. In 2014 election, at least it had promised that we'll create 2 crore jobs every year. It failed on that. It failed to do that. Agrarian distress, we know. It had problematized farmers' suicide. It has done nothing to allay the agrarian distress. In fact, it worsened, and it will worsen. But somewhere people sometimes decide that if for my core issues there are no solutions that I see on the horizon, and there is no alternative, and then you have somebody offering you say a national pride or a Hindu pride or a caste-based pride, then against nothing you choose that pride.
So you agree the opposition was actually offering nothing?
Opposition it could not communicate what its offer to the people was, and I don't think it was very different.
5 years' time, I think the Nyay came just a few months before the election.
It just came a few months before. And economy can't be measured, as Rahul rightly said, only on stock exchange. You see, inequalities in this country have been growing. The crony capitalism, what else is crony capitalism? When the top richest 1% can double their income, double their wealth in 5 years' time, that's crony capitalism to me. Which means that those who are on the bottom, they have not benefited very little or not benefited at all. So, and to answer your question, who's going to be the finance minister, I'll say Modi. Who's going to be the defense minister? I'll say the answer is Modi. Who's going to be the foreign minister? Answer is Modi. Who's going to be the commerce minister? Answer is Modi. Power is so centralized, and decision making is only in hands of 1 or 2 persons.
I'm sorry, Varun, I have to counter this because this is all true of Sonia Gandhi as well. So for 10 years in Dr. Manmohan Singh, she ran pretty much every ministry. The Prime Minister was absolutely quiet. And if you see the stock prices of ADAG, of Reliance Industries, of Adani, they have actually languished under the Modi government. They have this is very counterproductive. I would love to know the number of farmer suicides that happened when the Congress NCP was in power. Let's talk fact, not rhetoric. I don't have those numbers. I'm being upfront and saying, but just don't come and say things like, this has never happened before. I mean, 2008 and 1993 happened under the Congress government.
I'm sorry, Rahul.
So I'm not very good at debating these political issues, but I'm saying that there was enough and more that was happening. I think India was probably more communal under the Congress. than it was under the BJP. Now you will ask me to prove that. I can't. So by the same statement, you cannot say that India is more communal under the NDA than it was under the Congress. You cannot make subjective statements without fact, and that's one of the reasons why Modi is winning. He's going on fact. He's relating with the youth. Modi probably knows how to use an iPhone 10 much better than Rahul Gandhi does, and that's why he's connecting with the youth. And I'm telling you today that if he does nothing remotely close to what he did with demonetization, the only person who can defeat Modi from here on is probably Modi himself, and people may have to soon start living with it. God give him a long life. I have nothing personal against Rahul Gandhi as well, but if he stays fit, he's probably going to come back with a bigger mandate in 2024, and people will probably scoff at it right now. But like I said, the Congress had so much to go to him with. Agrarian distress, as you say he fudged numbers, you say he's not given jobs, you say he disrupted the economy on GST, you say he disrupted the economy on Demon. You had everything and more going for him. It was almost, the equivalent to Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton had so much on Donald Trump. So much so that she had sex scandals there and she couldn't do it. We need to respect these people who are voting are our brothers and sisters. They have voted for something, they are not senseless. Just because we do not agree with that vote doesn't mean that we should question it. Had Rahul Gandhi won, Modi's supporters may have criticized him, but you have to give the Prime Minister 5 years to run the country because he is now your Prime Minister, whether you like it or not. The minute these people go overseas, whether you go to Hong Kong, United States, people ask them who is the Prime Minister of your country, it is Narendra Modi. You cannot go out there and say it is Narendra Modi, but it doesn't work that way. So there is these are our brothers and sisters who voted, respect that mandate. And you say that Congress had 5 years to go to the people with, what were they doing in the 5 years building up to 2014? They had 10 years. Their ideologies are past. If you look at some of the comments that come through from former finance ministers under the UPA, the ideology, okay, I will, allow me to just say that Rahul Gandhi was interviewed by Bloomberg Quint just last week. Mm-hmm. He said that the model that Dr. Manmohan Singh and Narasimha Rao had in the 90s, early 90s, which liberalized this country, doesn't apply anymore. And the anchor asked him, so what's the new model? He said, we're working on it. I mean, really, you want to go to vote when the 65% of the population is under the age of 30, they are not going to connect with you. You need something to connect. And if it's something as small as a mobile phone, so be it. And he's working that. And we're probably not understanding the power of what's happening because change disrupts overnight. 5 years back, there was no Paytm, there was no Swiggy. These things just come and disrupt overnight. Disruption doesn't take a while to happen. He's relating, he's using technology. You may say he's using technology to brainwash people. So be it. Didn't the Congress do it for so long? Didn't Arvind Kejriwal try to do it?
At least we should give this to Modi that he took some really big steps. Like demonetization, we can keep on debating about what was good in it or not. But it was a very bold step and it hit the government really hard. Still they came out with GST, it again hit them hard and again they came back to power with a much, much stronger government. So, first of all, are you afraid of any such shocker again, like a demon coming in Modi 2.0? And if not a shocker, do you hope to have something like that big reform that the government needs to bring?
Yeah, just a point to make before that.
Sure.
I don't quite understand why every criticism of Modi has to come necessarily from a Congress guy. No? So the whole point about every criticism of the Narendra Modi government being a justification of the earlier Congress government is completely an irrational way of debating an issue. I think if you look at my writings, if you look at other people's like me writing, we have been one of the biggest critics of the policies followed under Manmohan Singh. When I was the first person who wrote about many of issues like Aadhaar and so on, which Narendra Modi was my ally at that point of time. Later he became an admirer of all that. But the point is that the point about the credible alternative being presented in front of the people is correct. I'm agreeing with that point. That there was no credible alternative to presented in front of people, either as a policy or as a narrative or as a leader. That's absolutely correct. But that doesn't absolve Modi of his wrongs.
Right. We have a couple of questions coming in from Facebook. Some of our users are asking questions.
Do you expect any policy changes from more public-private partnerships?
Is it targeted to someone?
Well, I don't know. But see, the whole economic ideology of the Modi government has been extremely confused. are you good? It has been very friendly to certain businessmen. Obviously, I don't know about the stock prices, but certainly stock prices don't necessarily reflect their fortunes in any form. The policies have there been initiatives in the public sector in terms of public investment? I don't see it. Right? Here and there, I don't see any. I didn't interrupt you. The point is that there is no initiative of this government which is in any form accelerated what has already been happening under the earlier governments. If you look at the direct tax collections, right? The growth rate in terms of direct tax, the sort of people who pay direct taxes have probably had in occasional years had higher growth rates under the earlier government's period. Now I'll say, I don't say I'm a Congress person here, had higher growth rates under the earlier Manmohan Singh government period, just as it had after demonetization. So there is nothing here that has accelerated anything significantly compared to the earlier period. But at the same time, Narendra Modi has been successful in terms of marketing some of his marketing every normal activity of the government as one of the first under his regime, right? And that kind of extraordinary marketing that has worked, creation of a narrative out of every normal everyday achievement, right? All of this has worked in his favor, and the opposition could not present a credible narrative against Modi.
So Rahul has to leave now. Would you like to?
No, I just had one very simple point. I would like to know one thing he has done to benefit one business house. If someone can just lay it out for me, I'm happy to debate it. One thing he has done for any of these so-called houses, because they've not got any loans, they've not got any land for capacities. I don't know what people are talking about. Reliance hasn't even bid for anything in the oil and gas sector. Adani is struggling with his pipes. These are the names that keep from. I want to know on fact one thing he has done to benefit these houses, and I'm happy to debate on fact. Because we deal with these companies day in and day out, and all they do is criticize the Modi government that things were much easier before. These loans were not given under the Modi government; these were given under the UPA government. So, on fact, if someone can come and tell me that this is what he did to benefit Adani or Ambani or any of that, Rafale started under the previous government. So it's just a request when people make such statements. Let's back it up. Okay, he gave so many acres of land to Adani. This was the land rate. This is what it should have been given at. Converse that to what a DLF may or may not have done with the previous family. So I'm saying if we can talk on fact, like there were some facts, and I'm not saying that the BJP was right on that. The BJP may well be totally wrong on the facts that they have presented. I am no spokesperson for Narendra Modi. I speak for India. I'm a young person. I want this country to progress. If Rahul Gandhi presents that alternative, I will go out there and vote for Rahul Gandhi. I have no problems. I voted for Dr. Manmohan Singh twice, so I have no problem. I just don't see a future there with that government, with that man. I will not vote for him, and I think I'm within my rights to do so. I'm just saying that when we talk about fact, just let us know that this is what the Modi government did to benefit. And what the BJP government did in terms of bringing out all these scams in 2012, they might well be wrong. There were some talks that, the 2G numbers were not. But they came with some numbers. Rahul has had 10 years, and he's not been able to come up with anything. So I think there's something called rhetoric. There's something called fact. The fact is that for the last 10 years, the Congress has been decimated. And until they come up with something credible that the youth of today need to relate. It is not the people 50 and over. I mean, I'm almost 40. I don't even think people 40 and over are going to run this country. It's people between the age of 18 to 25 that are going to run this country for the next 25, 30 years. If that constituency cannot be addressed and related to, then whichever party fails to do that doesn't have a future. And it's changing. Trust me, it's changing very rapidly. I mean, we interview young people. They don't even want to own cars and houses anymore. They're happy renting, doing Ubers. That's what I'm talking about, disruption coming in. And that since the point of savings rate was going down, just imagine if somebody doesn't have to go in and buy a 2 BHK for 4 crores or doesn't want to buy 2 cars of 20 lakhs each. That money is going to come into consumption somewhere. So I think the consumption outlook on India is very, very strong. I think it's here to stay. It's real because the way people are consuming is changing. We're eating in more at home than going out these days because of Swiggy. So I think anything that has to do with digital and the party that can best relate to the youth will probably have a future. If you're not able to, you will continue to languish. That's my limited point that I wanted to make.
So just one last question. When do you see Sensex touching 40,000?
I'm no astrologer. In fact, after the exit polls, I saw one astrologer on one channel, and he said Modi's stars are not aligned and he will not come. So I was supposed to be married by now with my family astrologer. So no astrologer. Well, it's already touched 40,000. The question that you should be asking is when is 50,000? But like I said to one of my earlier answers, if this government does nothing stupid over the next 5 years, the index should compound by about 15% from here. So it should be sooner rather than later.
Okay, thanks so much, guys. It was a wonderful discussion. I hope it continues to be like that, a healthy discussion. We need to debate on every topic.
It was a healthy discussion.
I hope dissent is appreciated.
Dissent is
Dissenters
also
are not murdered. And I hope India is plural, secular, progressive, as its constitution has written it, has promised its people.
And for healthy debates, we have to disagree first. Disagreement doesn't mean, it has been a peaceful debate. No one interrupting anybody else and nobody shouting out shouting anybody else. So, thank you.
Great. Thanks everyone.